If anyone has any questions, please answer them, or I'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So just wait for that. So Northeast Florida is home to over 50 endangered plant species. Some of these plants have a limited range and are found nowhere else in the world. So I've been exploring the Northeast Florida wilds for the last 15 years, and I'll be sharing some of these unique and rare plant species that I found over the years and how they're in imminent danger of extinction. And so by Northeast Florida, I'm talking about the First Coast areas and some interior counties. So that's Flagler, that's St. John's, that's Duval and Nassau County, and Baker, Union, Bradford, Clay, and Putnam. And out of these 9 counties, there are approximately 55 endangered plants and 38 threatened species. And you can find all this information off of the Florida Plant Atlas, which is an awesome resource to use. I go there a lot for a lot of my plant identification, and you can find all kinds of voucher specimens and where habitats are at. So it's a great learning tool, and I highly recommend everyone go check it out. And so why are a lot of plants becoming endangered? And the reason is just loss of native habitat. And that's the primary reason why a lot of plants and animals are becoming endangered. And that's from the conversion of habitat. So the creation of roads. There's already over 275,000 miles of roads in Florida. And there are more major road projects in the future, so that we'll have to look out for. Silviculture, which is tree farming. They pretty much scrape the bare ground, and they plant these trees really close together. So there's not much diversity in a lot of these tree farms. The trees tend to shade out everything. Also, large-scale agriculture is kind of the same, where they scrape the ground bare. They use a lot of pesticides and herbicides, so there's really no diversity in these agricultural areas. And then the draining of wetlands, which has been a thing in Florida since the 1900s. So every construction project still probably has some considerable amount of draining of wetlands in Florida. And then poaching. Poaching is an issue as well. Orchids and carnivorous plants are still commercially exploited. So I won't be sharing any locations tonight. I'll just be telling you the county records. And then fire suppression. A lot of these plants are fire adapted. So which means they have evolved with seasonal fire. And so without seasonal fire, these already sensitive plants get shaded out really quickly by faster growing species such as grasses and shrubs. And then the main one is development. Florida is a really popular state to live in. Around 900 people move to the state every day. And according to the new 10-year census data, St. Johns County grew by 43.9%, which is a huge amount of growth. And I thought that number was not true at first. So I had to look it up a few times just to make sure that that was a real number. Duval County was 15.2. Nassau County was 23.2. So they saw a lot of growth as well. And Clay County, 14.3%, and Baker by 4.2%. And so in the graphic below, you can see the lighter greens grew by 9%, and the darker color greens grew by over 18%. So Northeast Florida is experiencing a considerable amount of growth. And so this is the 2070 project, or from the Florida 2070 project. And this is from the 1,000 Friends of Florida and the UF Geo Plan and the Florida Agricultural Department. So they took baseline data from 2010 of the population growth, and they put in the numbers for the projected growth of what the population is going to be like in the next couple of decades. And from the projected growth models, they show that 2070 is going to be much more development in Florida. So this is quite a scary image to see. And so we'll zoom in on Northeast Florida, and we'll see, you can just see just how much more development is in Duval and St. Johns County. So this is a pretty scary picture. It seems bleak, but I think if supporting organizations like the Florida Native Plant Society, who already preserve and conserve a lot of our native communities, native plant communities, and they also restore a lot of these communities as well with endangered plant species. Also supporting these conservation land trusts that are working together to really preserve these large expanses of these wildlife corridors, as they're called. This is going to be the future of conservation as far as preserving these large swaths of land. So the first plant I gotta showcase has got to be our chapter's namesake, the Barton Zixia. This is Calidore colistina, and this is in the iris family. And this one has a really cool history where William Bartram first discovered this in the 1700s while he was exploring the St. Johns River area. And he wrote about this in his book Travels, which is an awesome book. I highly recommend it for anyone that really loves Florida natural history or just naturalist history. It's just a really great book on how wild Florida was in the 1700s. But the Barton Zixia is endemic to Northeast Florida and nowhere else. The best time to see this is in the morning. So you have to wake up really early to see the Barton Zixia. If the weather is cooler in the night, you can find it blooming all the way through noon. But typically it's about 2 to 3 hour window of seeing the Barton Zixia in bloom. And the best time to see this one is between April and October. And like a lot of these plants I'm going to be showcasing, they're fire adapted. So typically 60 days after fire, the Barton Zixia will have this beautiful flush where just a ton of these flowers are just blooming all at once. And it's just an amazing sight to see. So look for this one in seasonally wet open flatwoods and prairies. And this is a really good example of this flush I was talking about. So you can see this is like quintessential Barton Zixia habitat, really open, bare soil. There's some Peperomiajumella you can see on the bottom right and some ferns growing. So without the seasonal fire, a lot of these plant species will shade out the understory. And in 2016, we had a really cool opportunity of helping guide Roger Hammer out to one of our preserves and helping him find a Barton Zixia. He's a really amazing guy, super hilarious, and he already knew every plant already. So it was a really fun experience to be with him and get to watch like how he photographs a lot of his flowers. He uses a macro lens and he uses this light diffusing umbrella that he carries around everywhere. And he has this other tripod that he uses with a clamp, which is called a plamp. And it's essentially just a clamp that it softly holds the flower in place so it doesn't blow around in the breeze. This is Orbex Barganum, or the Pineland leatherroot. This one is almost endemic to Northeast Florida. It's found in a few counties in southeastern Georgia. But the best time to find this one is in between June and September. And it grows in seasonally wet and dry open flatwoods and sandhills and that are subjected to annual fire. So you'll see annual fire is a common thread with a lot of these plants. And this, the Orbex Barganum is considered a really extremely rare plant. Nothing is really known about its reproductive biology either. So every time I see a lot of pollinators on the Orbexum, I try to document them as much as I can. So I've seen resin bees, sweat bees, and these cloudy wings, and some other butterfly species I wasn't able to take photos of that seem to really like to pollinate the Orbexum. But it's a really unique legume to our region. And you can see here how this is how I usually see its growth habit, just growing over ferns and over Ilex glabra. But it has a really unique character. It has these really long strap-like leaves. So that's a really good way to distinguish Orbex Barganum. This is Hillanthus Carnosis, the flatwood sunflower. This one is endemic to Northeast Florida. And best time to see this one is between June and August. And this one grows on the side of the roads next to wet ditches and wet flatwoods and prairies. And this one has been used in the native landscaping trade. So it's quite easy to grow from seed, apparently. It would really be great to see this in some of our plant sales. Haven't seen that yet. It's a really just beautiful Hillanthus, and I would really like to see more of these endemics to our area on some of our plant sales. But this location that I found it in is in Clay County, and there was a whole bunch of these Hillanthus Carnosis in this one spot, right above the ditch line there. And this is its typical growth habit. It has this, it's about knee high, and it droops over, and the flowers tend to follow the sun around. But a really beautiful species. And I would love to see this in some of our county landscaping as far as growing them on some of these retention ponds. That would really add some beauty and add some diversity. This is Baldwinia atropurpurea. This is the purple disc honeycomb head. This one is southeastern coastal plain endemic, and it's already scattered in its locations in Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and North Carolina. So this is a very rare species to find. I've only found this one time, and I suspect it is in Nassau County as well, but I found it in close to Duval County and the Nassau County line. Best time to see this one is September and early October. It has a really short blooming window, around 2 to 3 weeks is what I've seen. And the best place to find this one is in wet flatwoods and savannas and peaty bogs. So you can find this growing right next to pitcher plants and colic roots, which are really good indicators species of the habitat that's required. And like all Baldwinias, it gets its name from this honeycomb-like head that's underneath the disc flower. So when the flower dries up, you see this really unique pattern, this honeycomb pattern that's unique to the genus. And so on the right, you can see the basal leaves, which are the leaves that are closer to the ground. And they're very linear. They're really thin, and they're kind of spatulate, which means they're kind of like a spoon shape. They're like a wedge shape. So it's pretty unique for this Baldwinia. Centrosema arenicola. This is the Pineland Butterfly P, and this one is endemic to Florida. Best time to see this one in bloom is June through September. And it grows in sandhills and scrubby flatwoods and dry upland woods. And it's a indicator species of a longleaf pine community. And this is typically where I've seen it. Anywhere there's sandy soil, longleaf pine, and turkey oaks, you can typically find the Centrosema arenicola. But the best way to tell Centrosema arenicola between Centrosema virginianum are the petal colors. So the flowers of arenicola are pink, more like a whitish pink, and virginianum are this violet purple color. And so if you flip the flowers over, the calyx lobes and the bracts are much shorter on arenicola. So those are really good characters to tell the two apart. And also arenicola, the leaves are a little bit wider and more round, but it's a really, really cool species to find. This is our one and only grass species, Tinium Floridanum. This is the Florida toothache grass. This one is nearly endemic, as it's found in a few counties in southeastern Georgia. And the best time to see this one is between August and October. And it grows in these sand hills and really dry flatwoods. So this one is really found in these drier areas. So the best way to tell this one apart between Tinium aromaticum is that Tinium floridanum likes these dry areas and typically has a single stem that comes from a slender rhizome, whereas Tinium aromaticum grows in these dense clumps in wet savannas and wet flatwoods. And you can see this on the left-hand side. Tinium aromaticum has these many branches and this cushion-like growth, as you can see in the photo in the middle. And then the photo on the right of floridanum has this typically like single stems, and they're growing in this really dry, sandy soil. So this is a really good way of telling these two apart. And this is a really good growth habit of Tinium floridanum. When the florets dry up, they tend to curl really, really, really well. And like this species is really adapted to fire. So if a fire does not go through for many years, this grass will stay dormant for many years. And that's my experience with finding this. As soon as there's fire, it really has this huge growth spurt and you're able to find it in flower. This is Baptisia Colicosa, the Florida wild indigo. This one is endemic to only St. John's and Clay County. So this is really a rare species. This is probably one of the most rarest species that I'll be showing tonight. And this is considered a G1 species, which is a critically imperiled globally because it's extremely rare. And there's only a few occurrences of this. And in those occurrences, there's only a few individuals. So this makes it especially vulnerable to extinction. And the best time to see this one in bloom is between May and July, and it grows in these dry sandhills and dry flatwoods. And in the two locations that I found this in Clay County, it was on the side of a road above a ditch right next to an overgrown sandhill. So this area was not protected. And then the other location that I've seen it in was in St. John's, which it was in a preserve that was being restored. It was once a pine plantation, and it had a bunch of this Baptisia Colicosa already in it. So it's a pretty special place. But I really love this Baptisia. It's really unique looking. And I'll go back to the first photo, it gets its name Colicosa. If you see these leafy like bracts, these calyx lobes behind the flower, that's how it gets its name, Colicosa. It just has these huge calyx lobes. But I think it's one of the most beautiful Baptisias, and it would be cool to get this into the nursery trade, though it could be very difficult to grow. But definitely a unique species to our area that we got to keep an eye on. This is Ruellia noctiflora, the night flowering wild petunia. And this one is found scattered throughout its range in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And the best time to see this one in bloom is between June and September. And it blooms only at night. So if you want to see it, you got to go searching at night or very, very early. And it's nocturnally pollinated by sphinx moths. And these sphinx moths have a really long mouth part that are only able to pollinate these Ruellias with these really long tubular flowers. The best place to see this night flowering Petunia is wet open flatwoods, savannas and pitcher plant bogs, and on the side of the road in some rural areas. And this is where I've seen a few of mine were on the side of a road in a rural community. So pretty hard to miss. The flowers are rather large for a Ruellia species as well. But you can see just how long the tubular flower is and just how critical it is for a sphinx moth to pollinate this flower. This is Rudbuckia Natida. This is the St. John Susan. This one is found scattered throughout its range in Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. And the best time to see this one in bloom is from May and October. And this is a really super tall Rudbuckia, and it's very regal. These blooms or these stems can reach lengths of easily 60 inches tall, which is a rather large wildflower. And this one can flower in the fall too. So there's two blooming times, which is pretty unique for this, I'd imagine. This one grows in wet open flatwoods and seepage slope bogs and on the side of the road next to a ditch and this is the only occurrence I've ever seen Rudbuckia Natida was on the side of the road in this really nice little meadow. So we were on our way back from Etonia Creek State Forest and we saw this and quickly turned around and pulled over to check it out. And it was just this beautiful meadow full of these Rudbuckias and Calapogon orchids and colic roots. So it was a really, really cool little spot. And this is the only time I've ever seen this Rudbuckia. And you can see Amy here, just showing you how tall these Rudbuckias can get. A rather large wildflower and just absolutely beautiful. I really love these. You can see on the bottom right-hand corner of the photo, those little Calapogon orchids, which are really cool to see as well in these little meadows, and colic root in the foreground, which are pretty good indicators of like a wet habitat. And this is another Latin name that I butcher, and this is Shunolorian Croqueum, or the yellow sunnybell. This one is found scattered throughout its range in the southeast, including Texas and Tennessee. But it has a pretty strange distribution here in Florida. Up north, it's found in these localized limestone outcrops, which Florida only has a few of these, and I believe they're only in the Panhandle, which this is not found in. But in Northeast Florida, it's found in just a few spots in these wet flatwoods. Best time to see this one is March and April. And these wet open flatwoods and pitcher plant bogs, sometimes the best, these habitats are typically wet in the spring and dry in the summertime. But this is a really rare plant. I probably won't find this again. In the spot that I found this in Clay County, it only had 2 individuals. So I'll have to keep an eye on this one, but this is a pretty rare plant to find in Florida. Here's another really rare species. This is Chondrogena etonia, and this is Etonia's false rosemary. And this one is endemic to only Putnam County, found only in Etonia Creek State Forest. There's a few other locations I've heard that's outside of the forest. But best time to find this one in bloom would be September through December. And this was first discovered in 1990 and added to the endangered species list in 93. And like most Chondrogena species, which are the mint family, this is a highly aromatic plant, so it smells really, really nice and pepperminty. And these Chondrogenas, especially Etonia, they love these like open scrub habitats. When we first visited this Chondrogena Etonia, it was in July, so it was not blooming then. So, but we still got to see it, and it was in the middle of the trail in an overgrown scrub area. And it was pretty easy to find because there was a rather large sign pointing us to the direction of the endangered scrub mint. But definitely we'll go back and see it in bloom. It's a really special plant. This is Metallia pubiflora, the sandhill spiny pod. This one is nearly endemic. It's found in a few counties in southern Georgia. And the best time to see this one in bloom would be April through June. I've not seen this in bloom yet. And apparently it's pollinated by flies. So I'd imagine the flowers have kind of a smelliness. Sometimes they're chemically, or they kind of smell like rotten flesh. That's what these flies and these beetles are attracted to. But the best habitat for this one are dry sandhills with longleaf pine and turkey oaks. And that's exactly where I found mine at, were in the sandhill with turkey oaks and longleaf pines. But the Metallia typically just meanders, it grows real slowly on the ground, and it does grow over things, but it's kind of a small little plant. In the botanical literature, they describe the fruit pod as a spiny cucumber, which I think is quite fitting. So, but that would be the fruit pod that is full of these seeds. And so this is in the Asclepia family, and like most Asclepias, in the Apocynaceae family, and like most members of that family, they exude this milky sap. Here's another Apocynaceae family that's in the Asclepias, Asclepia curtisii. This is Curtis's milkweed, and this one is endemic to Florida. The best time to see this one in bloom would be April through June. And I've only seen this in Sebastian, Florida, where I'm from. So every time I go visit my family, if it's in the blooming season, we go try to find the Curtis milkweed in our preserve. And it's a really special plant. It's one of my favorite milkweeds to go find. But in its most northern voucher is found in Clay County in the Camp Blanding bombing range, which is off limits to civilians. So not too many people are going to be visiting Camp Blanding at this location. So, but I put it in the presentation because there's other open sandy scrub habitats in this area outside of the Camp Blanding. So that means that there's potential to find Curtis's milkweed outside this. So pretty exciting. And every time I'm in these little scrubby areas over there, I try to look for Curtis's milkweed. And if it's not blooming, it's almost impossible to find because the leaves they blend in with the dwarf live oaks really well. And they typically grow right through these dwarf live oaks. But this is a pretty special plant, and I always love finding it with my family. So it's a really, really beautiful plant. This is Caulicanthus fluoritis, Carolina allspice. This one is native to southeastern woodlands. but it dips its toes into the panhandle, and Duval County actually has one voucher of it. Best time to see this one in bloom is April through July. And this one is pollinated by sap beetles. And the flowers are kind of stinky. They remind me of chemically, almost like an ammonia kind of smell. So the beetles are really attracted to the flowers. This one has been extensively cultivated for centuries. So we do have this one in our plant sale quite often, and this is where I found mine. And it makes an excellent landscape shrub or hedge. So mine is in a really shady spot in my yard. It's kind of moist as well, so it really likes the spot, and it blooms every year, and it tends to sucker out, so you got to be mindful of that. But it's a wonderful plant, and it's super unique to the landscape. I was reading that it's highly medicinal too, so it's really interesting to read up on that. And like any medicinal plant, you should be cautious and do as much research as you can. This is another Latin species that I butcher. This is Klesteopsis derrakata, the spreading pogonia. This one is native to the coastal southeast, so from Florida to New Jersey. And the best time to see this one in bloom is from April through May. It's pollinated by a wide variety of insects, and I can attest I've seen beetles in these flowers, bumblebees, resin bees, even ants in these blooms. And look for these in moist open pine savannas and bogs, and even in the edges of flatwoods. So I've seen these in pitcher plant bogs and in the edges of flatwoods. So it's a really wonderful species, and I just love the flower so much. It just reminds me of these little, like, I don't know, like a plane. Very, very unique terrestrial orchid. They do get rather tall too. So last year we found one that was 2 feet tall. And apparently they grow a little bit taller than this, but it's just really special walking up on a 2 foot tall terrestrial orchid. Just one of my favorites. This is for Asteria Godfrey Eye, or Godfrey swamp privet. And this one is in the Oleaceae family, which is privets or olives. This one is found scattered in some scattered sites in the coastal plain of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And the best time to see this one is in between February and May. So it flowers really early in the spring before any other native privet. So that's a good indicator of, and to distinguish them from other Floristerias. And this one loves maritime forests that are over shelled midden mounds. So it has a pretty particular growth habit. We were searching for this one for years. We were searching for this one for years when we finally just walked right into it. And we were super excited just because we were looking for it for so long. It has this really unique growth habit. It just kind of lays over on things. It's kind of spindly. And if you flip the leaves over, you can see has these minute hairs, which is a really good indicator of the species. Good to distinguish from other Foresterias. But this is a very, very rare Foresteria to find. So we were very happy to find this one. This is Litsy Astavala, the pond spice, and this is in the Lauraceae family. So think of the red bays or avocados. This one is found in the southeastern coastal plains from Florida all the way up to Maryland. And it flowers in late winter, and it fruits, it takes fruiting all the way through the summer, all the way to the following fall. And it has these little red berries, which birds love. This one, the Litzys and the Lauraceae family have been infected by this fungal disease called the laurel wilt. And it was introduced by the red bay ambrosia beetle. And so in northern Duval, we're seeing a lot of instances which our red bays are dying. They're just becoming brown and dying really fast. And that's because of this laurel wilt disease. It doesn't kill the plant all the way, but it just kills the majority of the growth. And so the plants generally sucker back. But it's something that everyone is typically pretty worried about. So look for this one on the edges of bay galls, depression marshes, and cypress domes. So this one really likes its feet wet. and it forms these these thickets around the edges of ponds. A really good character for Litsy is the zigzagging stems. That's a good way to tell between any other Lauraceae family. And here you can see in this depression marsh how it forms these thickets. But a really unique species to our area. And this is Peperomiajumella. This one is found in Florida and Jamaica. And this one is the most unique plant I think I've ever found in Northeast Florida. Florida is the only state in the continental United States that has native peperomias. So to find it up here is rather unique, because when I think peperomias, I think of the nursery trade. You can find these in Home Depot sometimes, and South Florida, where a lot of the native peperomias are found. But this one forms these dense colonies on the ground, unlike the other species that are more epiphytic, which means they grow on tree trunks or on rotted logs. But this one likes to form these dense clumps on the ground, and it really likes these shell midden mounds and these maritime hammocks. So if you know of a shell midden in one of these maritime hammocks, and if you're lucky, you might be able to find one of these. So like I was saying, this is fairly common in the horticultural trade, which means that this can be commercially exploited. So we have to be really careful of how we share our locations. I haven't seen the Peperomiajumella in flower yet, but you can see here in this photo of its rat tail-like inflorescence, which is pretty unique to the peperomias. But just a wonderful species, and I can't wait to see it in bloom this year. This is Platanthera chapmanii, or Chapman's fringed orchid. This one is widely scattered in northern Florida and Georgia and eastern Texas, but the majority of the plants, around 90% of them, are found in Florida. And so this is one of the rarest orchids in the United States. The best time to see this one in bloom would be July and early September. And last year when I found it, I was a little late, so a lot of the blooms were kind of raggedy and already brown. So you gotta time the blooms really well to go to see this one. The best places to find these are in wet meadows, bogs, and roadside ditches. And the only time I've seen Chapman's fringed orchid was on the side of a road in Baker County, and that was with other fringed orchid species. It was a really beautiful little spot of them. You can see on the left just how glorious they can be. They have these kind of super blooms, and I just love terrestrial orchids. They're so beautiful and fascinating. So the main character of Chapman's fringed orchid, as you can see the photo on the right, you can see these little fangs. Those are the hooks, and these are one of the main characters of the species, and they're not present in any other fringed orchid. So it's a really good character to distinguish from the other ones. Another character would be the nectar spur, which is found behind the flower. The nectar spur is typically the same length of the lip, and the lip is the little frilly section of the flower. And last but not least, this is the Parnassus grandifolia, the large leaf grass of Parnassus. This one is found in scattered locations in the southeast, but in Florida, it's found in the Apalachicola National Forest and in the Ocala National Forest. And the two places I've ever seen it were in the Ocala National Forest and actually outside of it. It blooms in the fall around October and November, and it's a great indicator species for high quality seepage habitats. And every time in both locations I've seen this one, I've seen unusual plants that I've never seen anywhere else. So I've seen eastern white cedar. I've also seen an endemic Arnoglossum species, which I cannot remember the name of right now, and some carrick species, some sedges that I have never seen and never been able to get identified either. So it's a really good indicator species of these high quality habitats. So these are usually wet areas over calcareous soils and bogs. And this is in like a swampy section of a creek that we found it next to. It tends to really like these really shaded areas. Though in the other location that I found it in, it was completely in full sun. So it's quite an unusual plant. It seems to really handle a lot of different types of environmental effects. But this one was found in this really nice crystal clear creek that you could walk through. And it was just a magical place, almost like a fairy bog. You just walk upon these Parnassias and you're just like, your mind is blown. They're just this nature's beauty in front of you, you know. But the flowers, for me, they kind of remind me of like a circuit board. They just have this really unique green pattern on them. So if you want to know more about endangered plant species, I recommend this Lunch and Learn series by Dr. Patty Anderson from the Florida Division of Plant Industry. And she did this really great 2-part series on literally everything you need to know about endangered plant species. So how the laws work, how the plants are listed, what landowners can do if they have endangered plant species on their property, and even hotspots in Florida of where to find a lot of these endangered plants. So it was an awesome presentation, and had all my questions answered. So it was really cool. So everyone should check this one out. And so if anyone wants the references, I can email them to you. But that's pretty much it, everyone. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I think we will open up.
Yeah, Adam, let's go through the chats. I had a few in the chats, and then
do you want me to read them, or do you want to just say them?
Yeah, no, I'll read them out.
Okay. Okay.
Oh,
Hold on.
mute yourself. All
There you
this
go.
on.
Well, he's gonna mute themselves.
Oh.
I'll read the text. How about that? Let me go find the text. There it is, the chat. All right. Okay, okay, so Betsy Harris has a good question. So what do we know, if anything, about disturbance, mechanical or other, in replace of fire? Found Orbexilum in roadside ditch this past year. I would assume that the area has been fire suppressed for the last 30 years. So what do we know, if anything, about disturbance, mechanical or not, to replace fire? So of course they mow a lot of these areas. Mowing kind of replicates the fire regime. A lot of counties mow too much. That's the problem. So if we can get them to mow on a better interval, that could replicate some fire, is what I was reading. They do some roller chopping in some preserves, which is controversial. I've read that it's not the best, and it does make sense. It disturbs the soil. So I would think, if anything, maybe mowing would probably be the best to replicate fire, if anything. So we do have I'd say a special guest on. We do have Edwin Bridges on. So Edwin, if you want to chime in on any of these questions, that would be awesome. Edwin has, I would say, a lifetime experience of researching plants. All right, so the Baldwinia is up here in Nassau. For those who don't know, Baldwinia autropurpurea was recommended and subsequently denied for federal protection in 2019. I did not know that, so thanks for that. It's really hard to get endangered plants listed nowadays, or plants listed nowadays on the Endangered Species Act. That could be bureaucratic or political, but I don't know, Edwin, if you want to chime in anytime.
In that case, they probably found enough of it growing on public lands where it was adequately protected, which had been mostly Fort Stewart, Georgia, and a little bit in Florida, but not so many protected locations in Florida. Like Cary State Forest has it, also Jennings and Simon State Forest. All three of them have the plant, but I think the Fort Stewart populations are what put it over the edge of having too many protected sites to be listed.
And is that you said that's in Georgia?
Yes, that's south of Savannah.
Okay, yeah, I didn't read about that one, so that's good to know. I was always reading how it was pretty rare plant in its location, so that's good. That's good to know. Kate chimes in. The tin for Tinium aromaticum means comb in Latin. That's definitely a good Latin tidbit. Latin is a fun language. It's very descriptive, and if you are in any kind of science or medical field, you will quickly understand that it describes a lot of things. Looking at peperomia, when you see patchy distributions of a plant, do you think that's because there hasn't been thorough surveys, or is the plant really only found in widely separate counties? That's a good question. So with this plant, it's found in these like coastal habitats. These coastal habitats are typically altered by, just the millennia sea level rise and flow, right? So it creates a lot of these islands, and so that creates a lot of these just islands of just patchiness. So that's I don't know, it's not the best explanation. I always found it interesting that it has such a disjunct distribution in Florida. So Edwin, do you know anything about the Peperomiahimalaya?
It almost needs tropical conditions. So it's going to be only in like the dense, shaded, natural oak hammocks near the coast that might have enough natural frost protection that the plant can really get established. And then once it blinks out from those, it would have a long distance to travel back. So some of those could be old records. So if you went out to try to find it in 10 counties now, you might not be able to. You might only find 1 or 2 sites in Northeast Florida, if any. It's very rare inland from the coast.
Mm-hmm.
Like Turtle Mound would be a good place in Volusia County where plants like that often reach their northern limit, and then a few will make it further north.
Okay, that makes sense. This patch that I found, I did some sleuthing for voucher specimens, and I just looked at a county record, which typically they have the location scrubbed out, which is good, but they usually will put the habitat. So I just kind of looked at habitats and I just started exploring, but I eventually found it. But this population, you can tell it's not that healthy. The leaves are always kind of yellowy. I've never seen it in flower, and I suspect just because it gets so cold up here, and it's such a tropical plant that it's having a hard time already. But I mean, it's been up here for who knows how long, so I imagine it's reproducing. So it's really very unique when I found it. I definitely want to go visit Turtle Mound. Let's see, next one. Please explain what a seepage habitat is. How about I'll let Edwin.
Okay.
Sorry.
A seepage habitat is where the groundwater comes out of the soil, reaches the surface on a slope or right at the base of the slope. So it's a wetland that doesn't get wet from water rising up from a flooded area, but water coming out. It's kind of like a diffuse spring. If you have a real concentrated area, you have a spring of water. If you have it more diffuse, just over a large extent of a slope, it's called a seepage slope or a seepage area. So you usually find these near the lower slopes, but above the bottom of the slope. And that's where you get so many of the rare plants associated with those habitats. They never dry out and they never flood.
That's a good description, yeah. Yeah, the seepage slopes that I've seen, the best example that I've seen was in Black Creek ravines, and it has these really good slopes. And so on the downslope, there's so much groundwater coming out of it. I mean, it was seeping out like a sponge. And for me, that was like, oh, that's a seepage slope, a literal seepage slope. So that's
one of those. I've got one of those in my background right now.
Nice. Some of the sloping is very gradual, so they're hard to find, but the habitat, I think, is a really good indicator. So do you recommend trying to plant endangered species outside of their normal zones, but in a similar habitat? I mean, if I was a professional biologist, I'd probably say no, but endangered plants are going to be rare and few, and I don't see the problem with that, especially if we're helping them grow more. I'm sure a professional biologist would say something different, but that's just my take on it.
I would actually encourage it.
Okay, that's good to know.
Because you may be adapting them to a little bit different climate, a little different area. So if they let's say something happened to the original sites, you might have material that could be used to introduce it to some area where the climate or the soil is more suitable now that where it wasn't that way 50 years ago. So let's say if they need to move a little bit further north, let's say, it would be good to have populations established that are more adapted to that variability of conditions a little bit north of where they were native.
Okay, thanks, Edwin.
Certainly the invasive species are doing that on their own. So we need some competition from rare native species if we're going to outcompete the invasives.
All right, so plant nothing but endangered plants. I like that though. So Kate asks, where can we look up when records of plants were made? So I find all of my vouchers off of the plant atlas. That is, what is it? The florida.plantatlas.usf.edu. So it's a very robust atlas. It's over 4,000 plants, I believe, right now. And there's thousands of voucher specimens. So that's how I find records of plants. And there's also other herbarium websites, and they typically all link up with this plant atlas, which is another great feature of it. A fun fact, Edwin helped start the plant atlas, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's pretty cool. Yeah.
We were doing that 30 years ago, yes.
Well, but yeah, it's a wonderful resource, and yeah, thanks for putting in the hard work for it. But yeah, I love it, and I recommend it to anyone who's just curious about native plants and just their habitats. It's a great place to look at and to learn a lot of the stuff. So, because it also will link you to iNaturalist, which is a great feature. So you can click on Google Images. So it's kind of this like really great resource that I really love using. All right, so does anyone else have any questions? I guess we'll call it a night. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out and hearing about our endangered plants, all of our unique flora up here. And I appreciate everyone coming out and seeing. Oh, and plus, so this is recorded. So we will put this up on our YouTube channel for anyone that missed it. Don't worry, we'll link this out in our social media, our Facebook page, and we'll shoot this out on our email as well. So don't worry if anyone, seemed like some people missed it. So, all right, thanks everyone. Thanks, Edwin.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a little nervous, but you know, I enjoy talking about the plants. So.
And even though there is no one right way to pronounce those scientific names, I've heard some different ones today.
Oh, okay, yeah. So every time I'm with like a biologist friend or someone that understands Latin really well, they give me this like the side eye, like, what did you just say? I'm like, well, I'm pronouncing this like it's an English word, and I think that's the problem. So
Nobody speaks Latin anymore.
I know. How would you pronounce the spreading rose begonia?
Klesteopsis.
Klesteopsis.
Except I might have left out a letter. Klesteopsis. Is there an I before the O?
Right. That's
Yep.
It always gets me. So
one syllable for every vowel, and the vowels should all be short.
It's tough. All right, so do you have? I'm sure you have a botanical Latin book that you could recommend.
The biggest one is one with the title Botanical Latin.
Okay.
By, Stearns is the author.
By Stearns.
And Stearns, Botanical Latin by Stearns, goes into the meaning of everything, every word, and how they're used in botany, not just how they're used in general Latin.
Okay.
So all the roots that these are used to combine to make the words, it also helps to know what those are.
Right.
And sometimes I will end up pronouncing the roots as if I was saying them separately. So like I'll say calopogon, not calopogon.
Oh, that's how I pronounce it. Calopogon.
Calo being beautiful and
Right.
pogon being grass. It's the beautiful grass.
That makes sense because you're putting those two together. So that makes more sense now.
But if it was a real Latin word, it would be calopogon.
Calopogon.
Yeah, so that's the classical Latin pronunciation. Botanical Latin, I would tend to emphasize the roots. Calopogon.
Okay. And with Greek, I'm sure it's a little bit different too.
I just do them as if they were Latin.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna check that book out. I think I need this book. So. All right. Well, cool. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Great
All right.
presentation,
I
Adam.
need to go.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Owen. See you later, man.
Okay.